All right. Ooh, that's really loud. All right. It is 5:30 on Monday, February 5th. We will call to order the board workshop of the Boerne Independent School District. First thing we'll need to do is establish a quorum, and I believe we have all board members present. Joe Tidwell, Christy Schmidt, Rich Senna, myself, Carlin Fryer, Garrett Wilson, Jessica Davila, and Maritza Gonzalez Cooper. We'll go into open session. Are there any visitor comments? Anyone sign up to speak? No? Okay. Then with that, we will start the board candidate workshop. So this is really meant to be conversational, educational, kind of talk about the roles and responsibilities of a school board member. Although I have the mic, I encourage and kind of ask that all of the board members, current board members, participate. So we talked about the board members that are present. We'll also, for the guests that are here, kind of go around the room and I think introduce everyone else. So first we'll introduce Dr. Kristen Kraft, our superintendent. In the suit next to her is Wesley Scott, who's our chief financial officer. Rick Goodrich, chief of safety and security. We have Dr. John O'Hare, Chief Administrative Officer, and Dr. Elaine Howard, our Chief Human Resources Officer. So thank you for all being here. So the state of the district, Dr. Kraft.
Oh, that is loud. Thanks for the opportunity to share a few facts. Today our enrollment's at 10,977. We have so many things going on in the district on any given day, and appreciate all of your support in the events of last week. And I've had a chance to debrief with our leadership team many times. Staff, we're beginning our after action review. I had PTO presidents Friday, debrief with them, and so we're just going through a whole series of after action review on the events from last week. The actual event State of the District is coming up towards the end of February, and I look forward to bringing a message to our community and celebrating all of the work that's happening across the school district. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So deciding to run, what does it take to be a school board member? We're going to talk about the level of commitment. We're going to go over the campaign calendar, what that looks like. So what is the role of a school board? A lot of people have a misconception of what the role of the school board is. The role is really, we have three purposes in a school board. Oversight and governance is really part of policy. So we set policy, we approve the budget, and we hire the superintendent. The school board does not run the schools. We do not hire principals. We do not get rid of teachers. It's interesting as we go to educational opportunities and continuing educational seminars throughout the year, there's always a question, who's been on a school board for the most number of years? And people will, stand up, and there's people that have been on a school board for 50 years. And I think, oh my gosh, those poor kids in that poor school district, that they've had no new ideas in that long. And then they also talk about who's been board officers for a long time, and there will be people who have been a board president for 20 years, and it's kind of the same thing, which you don't have any new ideas coming into the district. It becomes almost a dictatorship at that kind of tenure. So we're one of the things, it's not official, but one of the things that we tend to practice here is we rotate our officer group every year. And that gives an opportunity. We think anybody that's elected has the ability, and certainly we'd like to see everyone take a leadership role as an officer of the board. And so we traditionally have set and elected new officers on an annual basis. So is this video going to play? I love it.
My name is Rachel, and I'm in the 6th grade. I was invited to go to a school board meeting to get an award, but I didn't know what the school board did. So I asked my grandpa Freddie, since he used to be on the board. He said, Well, school boards are kind of
They're
like the grandparents of the school.
schools. They want good things for the students and staff. Even though grandparents aren't always around, we do our best to help you learn and grow. Let me see if I can explain it in another way. Think of the school board team as building a bridge between the community and the schools. They are your voice. Board members listen to parents, community members, school staff, and even the students about their hopes and dreams for their schools. They share these messages with the superintendent and other school leaders, and they advocate for their school district by speaking up for them with other elected officials and within the community. Another important job of the board is to provide direction for the schools. School board members choose a destination for the district. They might like the students to go to Topeka, Kansas, Paris, France, or even Mars. But they don't tell the staff how to get there. They empower the superintendent, staff, and students to choose their path. The board also makes a lot of decisions, like hiring a superintendent. The superintendent is the leader who makes sure the daily operations of the schools run well. The superintendent helps determine the best routes on the map, along with the staff and students. The school board also ensures that resources are in place so that the staff can complete their work and make sure students can reach their destinations. Let's say that the schools want their students to be able to play a musical instrument if they'd like, or fix a car, or understand algebra or other opportunities. The board makes sure that the school district has the money, staff, and materials in the right places at the right time to ensure success. The board and superintendent team help students complete their journey in their local schools and prepare them for the future.
After talking to Grandpa Freddie, I had a much better understanding of what school boards do. They build a bridge so that the community and the schools can communicate, and they set destinations for the schools so that I can reach my goals. The school board looks out for me, just like my grandpa and grandma do.
So things to consider when running for a position on the school board. One is time. As we mentioned, or as I mentioned, we tend to rotate through our officer group, and the board trustees, there are 7 of us. The time commitment varies based on the amount of time that you plan and really need to put into this and want to put into this. As the board president, you typically have, you're spending more time. The board president will meet with the superintendent generally before each of our school board meetings, probably 15 to 30 minutes ahead of time. And then, especially as we're in a position now, or in having a new superintendent on board, certainly all of us are spending more time on a monthly basis or weekly basis, getting Dr. Kraft integrated, and although she doesn't need a lot to do, she's integrated very well herself. So anybody else have any comments on time? I think the other thing that really goes into this, I'm sorry, Rich, I'll let you take the mic, but so we not only have to be prepared for the meetings themselves, we meet on, generally speaking, the third Monday of the month, unless there's a conflict. Sometimes there's holidays, the third Monday of the month, so we move those around. But then each of our board members is also a member of a committee, at least one committee. So Dr. Tidwell does our IT committee, and others. Christy is our, you're doing whole child, and then PTO liaison, right? Rich spends probably as much time as many employees do, because he is part of our government relations and legislative advocacy, so spends a lot of time with our elected officials, not only local but in Austin. But anyway, all of us have a role on at least one committee. Garrett does finance, Rich does finance as well, finance and audit. Jessica, you're doing communications, and Shaq, okay, right, Shaq. And Maritza is our liaison to Boerne Education Foundation and Safety and Security. Oh yeah, boundary committee that we're doing now, okay. I serve as president. You're required under law to serve as on the Safety and Security Committee. and I do finance committee, and then I also do facilities committee. So I mentioned training a little bit ago. There are continuing education requirements that are outlined that we are required to do on an annual basis. There are 2 opportunities to do those in general. The first of those is after the election, and typically it's the 3rd week of June. It's called TASB Summer Leadership Institute, or SLI. That is a 3-day conference that is hosted by Texas Association of School Boards. Sometimes that's in Dallas, sometimes that's in San Antonio. But again, it's important to get that as a first-year trustee. Anybody that comes in, there's a new trustee seminar, basically. Christy, you were, I think, the last one to go through that, but it was a lot of time on your part, because as a new trustee, you also have to learn Freedom of Information Act, public information requests, and those kinds of things. A lot of focus on learning rules and responsibilities of an elected body as a new school board member, to make sure we don't have quorums or even walking quorums, things like that, where the board would be potentially discussing or acting on things without having a meeting posted. We're very sensitive to that, to make sure that we don't do that. So that's the first training that takes place, is the 3rd week of June. And then there's also another TASB, Texas Association of School Boards, annual training and meeting is in the 3rd week of September. Sometimes it's the last weekend of September. Same thing, these are classes that are put on by districts across the state, that we get to choose which ones of those we want to go to make sure we get our required continuing education requirements in. We also do a teamwork and consensus building training that's required to have all 7 board members and the superintendent present. And on an annual basis, we do that typically the spring of every year. I think we're looking at getting that scheduled probably here in the next month or so. That is hosted, we'll do it locally, but it is coordinated by a member of Texas Association of School Boards staff. I think Orrin Moore will be doing that. It's especially important when you have a new superintendent to kind of get to know each other, set expectations and things. So those are the time and training and teamwork educational requirements and commitments. And then each year, typically it's the first meeting after the board election and the officer election. Each of us signs a new code of ethics. There's a standard code of ethics that the district has had for a number of years. Kind of sets our guiding governance oversight and makes sure that we're operating at the highest of ethical standards. So, Rich, you started to say something a while ago. I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the time commitment is really what you make of it. I think each of our trustees has different circles, social circles, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary school, or, having no kids in the district. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be out in the community as much as we possibly can, because you talk to people, and invariably there's so much misinformation in the United States today about education. So you really have to educate folks as much as you can regarding what's going on in our district. What may be happening in New York City or Chicago or Denver has no relationship to what happens here. But local government is also the closest to the people, and I think that's how our founders intended it to be with the 10th Amendment. Government that's closest to the people should be the most effective. So it's incumbent that you communicate a lot with individuals and be out in the community and listen.
Anybody else?
I want to say something in regards to the governance for those that are interested in running. I think when people think of elected positions, you think of the way it operates, like a city council or county commissioners or state, where there's, and that's not really the way that TASB has us set up when it comes to making decisions. And so there is, once you come in for a seat, it's going to be a real eye-opening that as a board collectively, we operate very differently than you are accustomed to if you were to be involved in city council or county commissions and those type of governing bodies. It's very more unified spirit, and that starts with that. We land here like that on Boerne, but that's really what it's taught from the Texas School Board Association, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Do y'all have any questions?
So just to elaborate a little bit on that, Jessica, you're right. So none of us as an individual member of the board has any authority outside of the boardroom in a called meeting. County commissioners have authority to do things in their precinct in which they're elected, right? City council members are elected from a district and they advocate for their district. Each of us in the school system or on the school board are elected at large, and we only make decisions when a meeting is called to order and until a meeting is adjourned. Outside of that, there is zero authority. And when a decision is made and voted on at the board, even though there may be different opinions about a topic, when that topic has been voted on, the board is expected to support that decision, period. And that is, there's no back talking behind that we didn't get our way or somebody didn't get their way. It is extremely important to make sure that we support the decisions that are voted on by the board.
And then the other thing I would add is, depending on city council or, again, going to commissions, they may receive some kind of stipend, cell phones, things like that. That doesn't apply here. So just letting you guys know that, because a lot of people will ask, and I'm like, no, we're not set up that way. So I don't think anyone's anticipating that, but just so it's on the record.
Good points, good points. So the time commitment, again, we'll kind of talk about that. Preparation for meetings. So the way that our meetings are done, the Melanie Richardson is our secretary to the assistant to the superintendent and the board. She and Dr. Kraft create, I almost said craft an agenda, but you literally craft an agenda. So that gets reviewed by the board president, make sure that we have everything on the agenda that is needed to be discussed at the next meeting. Those go out. The board package then is compiled by Melanie, and there's a computer program that all the documents are uploaded in, and that's sent out no later than 72 hours prior to the board meeting. So we'll get those on Friday afternoons for a Monday meeting, and it's really not a desire. It is the expectation that all board members have reviewed all of that information and they come prepared to the meeting ready and having reviewed that information. Not doing that is a disservice to the district. So you're expected to attend meetings. I think very rarely do we have someone absent from a meeting, and if we do, it's generally for one of two reasons. One is there's an illness of some kind, or number two, there was likely a student of theirs that's in the district participating in something, and so that's a more important place to be. As Rich said, we are visible. We try to be out in the community as much as we can, whether it's at athletic events, performing arts, committee meetings. We are at all kinds of things, and even different organizations throughout the community, whether it's the Economic Development Corporation, Chamber of Commerce, all of those things. Dr. Kraft is an ex officio member on those, and some of us attend some of those meetings as well. I already talked a little bit about the specific training requirements and what those look like. The expectation is to, we are, as the video said, a liaison between the community and the administration. So we're listeners a lot, typically trying to make sure that if there's a concern of some kind, we've directed that person to the person that is closest to the event, so let's try to get it resolved that way. But you certainly need to understand policy. I had no idea there were so many policies in a school district until I was elected. There's a whole website devoted to what our policies are out to link on our website. And then I talked about the TASB conferences. Generally, we're able to attend summer leadership here in San Antonio. They also do the same conference in Fort Worth if you have a conflict with the San Antonio one. in June. But then the September, October one is only in one city each year. So a little bit of this I kind of already hit. So the commitment to teamwork, it is not expected that board members agree on everything, but it's expected that they put individual differences aside, work as a team, and support the decisions of the team. So collaboration is critical. There's no place for an axe to grind approach. The worst school board members, and we see those when we go to these conferences, are the people who've wanted to get elected because they don't like this particular football coach, or they want to get rid of this person in the school district or something. That is, you're looking out for a handful of students when our job is to really represent almost 11,000 students. So collaboration is critical. We don't grind axes. Diverse talents and backgrounds is a great asset. It can be the greatest asset of a board. We're all varied in what our backgrounds are. And again, we stay focused on what's best for all of the students, not just a particular cohort that somebody would be advocating for. There is a candidate webinar that TASB hosts also. And I think there's actually a recorded video of that that's on the TASB website if anybody has an interest in watching that. But it does talk about the difference between the board and staff responsibilities, how to campaign constructively, what it takes, information and insights about being a candidate, and then there are ways that you can ask questions out there as well. I mentioned ethics. It is expected that we do things that are high in ethical standards, and we're not going to cross the line in doing something that would shed a bad light onto the district. And I think the board members collectively are really good about holding each other accountable for that. So one of the things we talk about is the administration is the ones who run the school district, right, under Dr. Kraft. The board members should be the proverbial 10,000 feet level, keeping an eye on what's going on. When a board member gets into the weeds, they're not acting as a board member, they're acting as an executive, and that's not where we need to be. So we remind each other frequently if it's necessary, although it's typically not, that our role is not in the weeds. So ethical considerations should be at the forefront of every decision made. We hold a position of public trust, and it requires the highest standard of conduct. So we focus on providing the highest standards of education for all students. Campaign quick reference calendar. So this is updated for 2024. The first day to have filed was on Wednesday, January the 17th. The last day to file is at 5 o'clock on Friday, February 16th, so a week from this coming Friday. If there's a desire to declare a write-in candidacy, that can be done as late as Tuesday, February the 20th. And the last day to register to vote is April the 4th. Early voting begins on April 22nd, which is a Monday, and then the last day of early voting is April 30th on a Tuesday, and the election is always held on the first Saturday of May.
Just really quick, the election, is there a city election happening too? I'm in Bexar County, so I'm not sure. I don't get to vote on. So with that, it'll be a busy election versus when it's just a school board election. There will be more voter turnout with Fair Oaks and Boerne.
And Kendall County too, right? Is the county, when is the county one?
That is, yeah.
What about the commissioner race? When is that? That's March. Oh, okay.
So between Fair Oaks and Boerne, it'll be a higher voter turnout.
So if you're interested in running, there are forms that need to be filled out. There's an application for place on the ballot. Melanie has a package of these forms that she can provide to anyone that's interested. So there's an application for a place on the ballot. Every candidate is expected and is required to sign a code of fair campaign practices. And then the package includes the code of fair campaign practices form. cover sheet. Any candidate or every candidate is required to designate a campaign treasurer. And then if you choose to do modified reporting declaration, you can sign that form. And what that form says is you don't plan on spending more than X dollars, and I forget what that number is. It's a little over $1,000 this time. But if you do go and you sign that modified reporting, but if you end up going over that, then you start having to do the actual campaign finance forms. But those forms are all required to be submitted, completed, and attested to when they're filed. So as I mentioned, each candidate must appoint a campaign treasurer who files the necessary reports of contributions and expenses, the calendar for doing that. Everything gets filed here at the school district. Melanie is our election official. There is a required form on the 30th day before the election, the 8th day before the election, and the 15th day after the appointment. If you're a current office holder and you've not chosen to do the modified reporting declaration. And then after the election is a final report. And there is links to all of these and the Texas Ethics Commission Campaign Finance Guide on the district's website. This is a list of resources that are available. Melanie can provide these if anyone is interested in looking at them. So the Code of Ethics we always post on the district's website. The board each year updates and ensures that the board operating procedures are on the district's website. It's what the board operates as, the roles and responsibilities of the board, how we perform, how we act, and how we respect. Financial resources is on the district's website as well. Kendall County election administrators, so we do hire Kendall County to administer the election for us. But again, all forms and everything are done here. The only thing they take care of is the actual early voting and then the election day activities. There's a website, again, as we mentioned, TASB a number of times. Secretary of State's Election Division has information, Texas Ethics Commission, Finance Guide, and then again, the video we looked at is part of board roles and responsibilities on the TASB website. And with that, I'd ask if anybody else has any other questions or any other contributions. Kind of wanted y'all to participate.
Comment that Jill makes about, Jill, that comment you always make about when you first ran for the board and getting on the board. I always like the comment you would make about. No, not that one. Just kind of your feedback as to what you thought you were coming onto the board to do, and then once you got here, the part about.
You're giving me a great setup, and I feel like I'm failing it completely. But I mean, no, I think it ties into. I was quiet for a while. I grew up here. I knew people that were really happy with the board and people who weren't, and I talked with those folks. And but I also just tried to, particularly for the first 3 months, I think I made it, was not immediately tell everybody how I think they should be doing everything. I waited at least 4 months to start doing that. So, and I know that's probably, I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Maritza, but that was helpful. And it just echoes what Carlin said. I've been on boards, been on different types of things like that, and school district trustees and how it works is way different. And so that's one of the reasons, just kind of try to learn as much as possible. It's not like being on a charitable board. It's not like being on a city council. There's a lot of things that are really just kind of different about it. So I don't know if that helps, Maritza. Okay.
Okay, I would add that when I got on the board, Donna Sharp and I got on the board at the same time in 2014, and we had both been involved in a lot of things: long-range planning committee, scheduling committee, citizens budget committee, and I thought I was well prepared. And relatively speaking, I think both Donna and I were. But my gosh, there's so much to learn that you really have to take a humble approach and be a sponge and learn. And I think it's incumbent upon those sitting on the board as well as administration to welcome new board members in and teach them as much as we possibly can teach them so they can be a productive board member, as quickly as possible. That's the goal. Christy is an example. This is her first year on the board, but she had been so heavily involved in the school district in so many ways, and really was a great student and learned a lot. And I would say you were pretty darn effective from the moment you got on, which is a great goal to have, so, but it does take a time commitment and a heart to want to learn.
And I'll just add to going through the campaigns, when I was running for election, and you hear things where someone's committed to starting a Facebook page to do a recap on board meetings. But that's not, again, we govern very differently. I can't stress that enough. We have one designated spokesman when it comes to the board, and that's with Carlin, unless we determine otherwise for media. So I think there's different ideas out there, and that's not part of our governing process. And that's just not Boerne. That's the way it's set up for Texas schools.
Well, I would just say that it's not me, it's the board president, it's the spokesperson, right? Whoever the board president is at the time. So yeah, we it's very important. There have been boards in the past, and I know there are boards across the state that still have these issues where any and every board member will pick up the phone and call the media, and they'll tell them something, and what you end up having is information that's incorrect often, and is not the voice of the board as a whole. And so I don't typically even do anything with the media that doesn't go through Dr. Kraft, or and she works with Brian Benway to do that. So or even Dr. Price before Dr. Kraft. So when we do put information out there, again, we want to speak, and we only speak as one voice, because the decisions that are made are as a board in whole and not as individual members. And so we support that. We don't allow other people to have quotes in the paper. Now, sometimes the paper will pick up quotes and do things on their own, but by board procedure that is adopted, only the board president is the spokesperson for the board.
And they usually pick up the quotes from our board if we say something outside. Unless the board president.
I'll say too, being a new board member, everybody wants to be your best friend in the beginning, right? So just having discernment and a lot of trust and big ears. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so remember that analogy. But on the flip side, you also have to have tough skin, because everybody wants to be your best friend some of the times, and sometimes they want you to listen to some really hard things. So just being prepared to listen and trust, and to remember that we're fighting the fire from the helicopter and not from the fire hose.
And the other thing, if you read the Express News, and I don't know how many of you read that, but invariably every couple of weeks there's an article about a different dysfunctional school board in the San Antonio metropolitan area. And it really, quite honestly, the ways there, and there's only a couple of districts really, but the vast majority do very well. But there are a couple of districts that are constantly in the media because their board members have a personal agenda, like Carlin mentioned earlier, to fire this person or hire a relative, and it really is shameful, because the people that lose are the children. The children lose. And when you see a dysfunctional school board, as is the case, well, I'll just say it, South San Antonio, totally dysfunctional. There's a reason they've lost a quarter of their enrollment over the last 10, 15 years, because they're dysfunctional and they're constantly at each other's throats, and nothing productive comes from that. And you've got a smattering of districts in the state like that, but like I said, the vast majority do well. And I think what Carlin also mentioned before, by rotating leadership, that's really, really key, because when you hear stories of some small town in West Texas where one person has been the board president for 9 years in a row, it's very easy to fall into unilateral thought process rather than reaching out and getting input and from your fellow trustees, which is very, very critical. And we don't have that problem here.
See, it worked. I waited long enough and everybody talked. All right, any final comments or anything? All right, then I think we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the budget workshop. And Dr. Kraft, I will turn that over to you and
All right.
introduce it.
Well, with this special called meeting, we thought this would be a great night to pair our budget workshop for our first discussion. So, as a reminder, the numbers that you're going to see tonight are preliminary, and just as a connection to our prior conversation to those in the audience, when you think of the responsibilities of a board, this is one of those decisions that the board makes, is you approve a budget. And so we have a series of budget workshops planned for you, and Mr. Scott is going to kick us off tonight.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kraft. Good evening, everybody. What do I need to do? Just push a button? There we go. Okay, this is the first budget workshop of this budget season. Tonight we're just going to talk about some general assumptions going into this season. We're going to talk about a picture of available revenues. We're just going to kind of do a table setting. We're going to talk about some of the existing growth commitments that we have at this point in time, and then what we're going to do after this. So of course, budget work on the budget lasts all year long. We've been talking about the 24-25 budget proceeding this year, of course, but as the summer and the fall began, we started looking at what kind of enrollment came in for 23-24 and making adjustments in that regard. We've been assessing the needs of the campuses and the different departments, and where we are on this timeline is right there in January to April, where we're starting our workshops. We generally have about 5 workshops. I'll give a picture of what those workshops actually address later on in the presentation. We'll work through, our budget initiative process is open right now, and that's where campus leaders and department leaders are putting in a request to a system for the different programs and or needs that they have to be addressed last year that would be beyond what the budget already allows for. In June, as required by law, we'll adopt a budget, and because we're a June year in, that's why we have to do it in June, because in September or August, when we actually know what our property values are and have an understanding of how those property taxes will be compressed, we'll actually pass a tax rate to support that budget in August or September. All right. Some assumptions about this year's budget. Right now we're running with a enrollment of 11,060. That is a 150 increase from the snapshot enrollment of 10,910. We're going to use an ADA percentage of 93.25. That is the same average daily attendance percentage that we used for the 23-24 budget. Just a note, at this point in time, we're running about 94%. Okay. So as we get closer to about, we'll have a better idea. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Typically. our goals are, and Dr. Hare can correct me on this. I believe it's 97 at the elementary level. It's 96.5 at middle schools and 96 for high schools. Is that that's the goals that we shoot for? We generally fall in the last couple of years about a percentage point below that. Yes. Yeah. And we're doing a lot better this year, but we will see how. 11,060 is in between the low and the moderate projections of the low projection was about 100. The moderate projection was in the 180, 190 range, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's a good idea. I've got a note on that. We will get it done. The last assumption that we're operating on for today is a 10% growth in property values. I consider that a fairly conservative number, and as we've talked about before, Boerne and the confines of Boerne ISD has experienced plus 20% value growth over the last 2 years. And it's a bedroom community, so most of those are homesteads. The state law limits how much you can be taxed on an increase to 10%. That's called the homestead cap. That's a 1-year cap. So if values don't go up at all, our net taxable value will go up almost 10% just by itself. And that's notwithstanding growth. Boerne ISD has experienced about $500 million in value growth the last couple of years, and that number should be bigger this year, just based on some of the things that we were just talking about. Is there any questions or comments on value growth? All right. So here is a picture of the initial revenue estimate for 24-25. What I would point you to is the second line item on the growth in the M&O tax, which, by the way, as has been discussed several times, one of the board's jobs is to adopt a budget. You adopt three budgets: one for the general fund, which is supported by the maintenance and operations, or M&O property tax. One is for the debt service fund, and which is supported by the interest and sinking, or INS tax. And then you adopt the child nutrition fund as well. For purposes of today And for most of our budget workshops, we'll be talking about the general fund. The debt service and the child nutrition fund are pretty simple funds. We'll talk about those in the April-May time frame. So the predominant amount of our discussion will center around the general fund. And so the second line item is just the growth in the M&O levy of $7 million based on 10% growth. From there, I would point you to the sixth line item down, which is a negative number of 5.4 million, just based on the state funding formula. When our values go up, generally the state aid comes down, and we go through this up and down cycle of values coming up and state aid going down until they pass new legislation. So in 2019, we get out of recapture, and then our values slowly come up, and state aid goes down until they passed the legislation last summer, and we got out of recapture again, and our state aid went up a significant amount. But now the first year after that legislation, it'll go down again. The last item I want to point out is the last revenue line, the federal and other sources line of $495,000. That's gone down the last 2 years. Part of that was planned for, in that we were recognizing indirect costs from the ESSER funds that we were receiving, and so that was planned that would come down. The 24-25 will be the first year that we don't have any ESSER funds post-COVID. So the other item that significantly reduced the federal and other sources line is the SHARS revenue provided by rendering services to Medicaid eligible children during the school day. As we discussed, the state is experiencing the school districts are experiencing the fallout of a fight that the state of Texas has been having with the federal government for well over a decade that they've lost, and the fallout for us is a reduction in those revenues. So I've incorporated that into 24-25. If you compare that picture of revenue to our current amended budget, that is just under an $800,000 increase over the 23-24 amended budget. Are there any questions or comments about the picture of revenues?
Yeah, a couple. Assuming growth of 150 is about 1.5%, basically that plus running inflation right now, hope that folks in Austin see stuff. But question on the other local,
Yeah, within other local, that $1.4 million number is at $200,000 for interest earnings. That's an extremely conservative. As we discussed in Finance Committee, the general fund has earned $1 million this year. That's the one place where I intentionally do not I under budget that, and the reason that we don't want to be dependent on interest earnings for any kind of recurring cost, and there was a interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday, I think, and Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, got up and talked about how resistant he was to lowering the Fed funds lending rate of 5%, which is what's driving that interest rate for us right now. That he's not going to see it he's not going to recommend that they reduce it until they're convinced that inflation is down to 2%. And so that's encouraging. All the prognosticators out there say that the Fed is going to reduce interest rates 6 times within a year, so it to the general fund's benefit, we hope that Chairman Powell can hold out as long as he can, but in the meantime, we're going to continue to budget that very conservatively. Absolutely. So the new instructional facilities allotment, or the NEFA as we call it, that application will open up in the fall. I have incorporated, that allotment's based on enrollment, and I've estimated 400 for purposes of this presentation. That generates about 400,000 in NEFA funding. That is a part of the 13 million in state aid that you see between the 18.6 base and the $5.4 million decrease. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is an overall increase in funding. If you look at 22, 23, 24, 25, and these 3 school years, it's gone from about $8,500 a student to about $8,800 a student. So from 23 to 25, it's a couple $100 increase per student. Not per student. Excuse me. I did the calculations on that. It's not quite the allotment. It's a little over $5,000 a student. That is not a I assume the same percentage. Yes, sir. You're talking about comp ed funding, and I'm assuming 23 for weighted average daily attendance, or WADA. The most of the formula is calculated by your average daily attendance plus all of your special populations, and the combination of those two is WADA, right? Weighted average daily attendance. And so the free and reduced children that comprise our comp ed students, the CTEs, special ed kids, all those other, I just assume 23, 24 when I go into 24, 25.
Well, it's just a question, not necessarily budget related, but on the revenue side. Do you have a gut on what the tax collection as of the end of January was? Did we catch back up?
I should know the exact answer to that within a couple of days.
Okay.
But
I thought that might be too early.
They look pretty good so far.
Good.
All right. Any other questions on revenues? Okay. Well, let's talk about the fun part then. I guess just a couple more notes on revenues. That's about 2/10 of a penny reduction. That's just based on the template. We won't know what compression looks like until the comptroller releases their take on average value growth late in the spring. So do not put any reliance on that at this point in time. And we've already talked about lower indirect cost and charge. Those were the two things that I really wanted you to take away from this. All right, our initial expenditure base. So if we take the 23-24 amended budget as is, we take out all the one-time costs and carry forward the rest as base cost, and we add in all of our instructional coaches that have been paid for ESSER funds that we plan to absorb in this year, $680,000. Then we come up with a $98.4 million budget, and if we compare that to available revenues, where we start this year is with a $250,000 deficit. This is not a pretty picture, but it's also not an uncommon picture in Texas right now. When we were at Midwinter last week, I attended a CFO roundtable, and this was a very, very, very common story. When you have hits on your revenue like the ones that we took on SHARS, when you have significant increases to certain functions with certainly with good purpose, like our safety and security budget, which is more than tripled over the last couple of years, right? When you have six-figure increases in utilities, when you have six-figure increases in property insurance, and you don't get support for that, from the state for those those expenditures, then this is what the picture looks like. Yes. Don't disagree. Mhm. Sure, sure. Are there any more comments or questions about the expenditures? So speaking of things that we need to do, we need to open a new campus. So anytime you open a new campus, there are things that we're going to have to consider to add to that deficit. One of them is we've got to have a front office. We've got to have a custodian. We've got to have a school resource officer. There will be a significant six-figure commitment to add to what we put forward as a budget to accommodate Viola Wilson Elementary School. And no, thank goodness we're not talking about a high school right now. Yes, ma'am. So we'll have a whole new set of utility bills for a new campus that will be in the $100,000 to $200,000 range. And anytime we open a new campus, they're going to need an initial supply of Band-Aids and basketballs and microscopes and everything else they need to get started. That generally ranges from $250,000 to $400,000. I believe $400,000 is what we spent on HERF in 2019. All right. Beyond that, some things that we'll be watching for. We've been talking with departments, and the primary purpose of those meetings with departments was to see how the 23-24 budget was going for them, and to see if they were aware of any increases to existing commitments that we have, any rate increases, and so building in what we know we're going to spend if we get another 150 students plus known rate increases. Right now we're talking about $350,000 in known commitments that we're going to have right now. I keep hearing rumors of another 25% increase in property insurance premiums. Keep in mind last time when we went out for RFP on property insurance, we fared much the same as every other school district in Texas. We got no responses to that. TASB was our only choice. And the most interesting thing that we're looking at right now is all of the uncertainty related to hold harmless provisions. So I'll talk about that for just a second. The legislation that was passed last summer provided for a number of hold harmless provisions and didn't provide for some, and we'll talk through those. The state did increase the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000, and did, Senate Bill 2 did make provision for districts for the state to make up for what we lost in our levy as a result of that increase. So we do get additional state dollars because of the on the M&O side because of that, and we do get additional dollars on the INS side. But Senate Bill 12 was passed as well, and that ratcheted up the benefits for those over 65 tremendously, right? So they did it all in one year. So there was a $10 million decrease to our levy in October when that was calculated by Kendall County Appraisal District. $3 million of that applied to our INS funds. The way that Senate Bill 2 is written, the M&O hold harmless made up for that, which is evidenced by us seeing the revenue per student continue to go up. But we do not get anything for the amount of levy that we lost on the frozen side for INS. We were prepared for that. Our INS budget was flexible enough that we were able to make even a $3 million adjustment fairly easily, and we did that for on the 2022 remarketing. We were talking about an $18 million defeasance, and then we pivoted to a $15 million defeasance. That was pretty easily accomplished, but that is still being debated in Austin. I just wanted to bring it to your attention to the extent that you wanted to advocate for the district in that regard. There are already voices that were in positions that weren't as flexible as ours. The last thing that I want to talk about is additional state aid for certain districts impacted by compression, and I put the text from the Texas Educational Code that was put in there by Senate Bill 2. My understanding of this is that this was written for districts that would be harmed by the implementation of Senate Bill 2. But the way it was written, it helps those that it wasn't intended to help, that don't need the help, and it doesn't help the ones that they intended it to help. The way it's written benefits Boerne ISD. There have been models run that show that if this hold harmless was implemented as written, we would be getting an extra $9 million this year and next year. That there's a lot of debate, both at the TEA and then in Austin at large, about how this should be done. And I'm just bringing this to your attention at this point in time. Once again, if you want to advocate for the district, $9 million would make a big difference. Yeah. Where that comes from is in 22-23, we got $9 million. We paid $7, but recapture by itself was calculated at 16, and there were provisions from existing law at that time that reduced that to 7. And the way that they wrote it, that's how it benefits us. We're not assuming that revenue. And the TEA certainly hasn't. If you look at the summary of finance that they put out on a regular basis, that they certainly haven't done that either. So we're just, somebody talked about having big ears before. I'm using all 4 of them. I'm listening as much as I can to see what the tone and the tenor and which way but there's been nothing on that yet. No, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Yes, sir. No, it's not to recapture. If our values continue to go up at a point in time, state aid will be reduced to the point where we really don't get any, like we did in 22, 23. You know, because there was a, I remember there was a 13 million jump in state aid from 22, 23 to 23, 24, right? When they implemented Senate Bill 2, I mean, it drastically increase state aid and reduce the local side, which eliminates recapture to the point where we got some state aid. But you know, our baseline for state aid, it comes from the available school fund that every district gets per kid, and that amounts to about $4 million, and then we get some for a very few small things on the tier 1 side of funding. But no, that's not recapture. It's just recapture will happen naturally as values continue to go up. 0. Yeah. Yes, sir. Senate Bill 2. Yeah. They rewrote the formula a little bit. And yeah, we had initially budgeted for recapture in June. Senate Bill 2 came out in August, so we amended to. Remember, we made 8-figure adjustments to the budget because of Senate Bill 2, right? And it was greatly to the taxpayers' benefit, right? I didn't see a model, Garrett, where recapture would come into play in 24, 25. It's not far out, 2 or 3 years out, but it's not in play, and certainly to the extent that our growth starts ramping up to where it was before, that staves that off. All right. Any other questions or comments before we proceed? Okay, so here are our traditional board workshop topics. We'll talk about pay and benefits increases in staffing. Dr. Howard will take care of that in March. Ms. Flores will meet with us in April and talk about programs and budget initiatives. And then May, I'll come back and I'll present a picture of a more refined picture of what the budget looks like and present it by function, incorporating what we've talked about. June, we've traditionally canceled that meeting. Last year was kind of a weird year. If y'all remember, we didn't even meet in a workshop until it was March or April, I think, just because we were waiting for the legislator, and we couldn't wait anymore. So we did have a June workshop. But if it's a clear picture in May, we've traditionally canceled those. But we will as discussed before, meet to actually in the June board meeting to pass the budget. The next one is Dr. Howard, March 4th. Is that your calendar? All right.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Scott?
So what was passed by Senate Bill 2, if it was Senate Bill 2, it was passed in a special session, did increase safety and security funding by about $100,000. The district has received about $750,000 in security grants related to some of bringing the district up to the minimum safety standards as defined by the state, and we're constantly going through that application process, but all the various proposals to substantially increase security funding did not happen.
It's worth remembering that in the current state budget, there's literally $4 billion in this biennial budget dedicated to K through 12 public ed that is not being released because legislators couldn't pass bills to allocate the $4 billion that was put in the budget. I mean, this is quite frankly unbelievable. I mean, that alone would do a lot for Boerne ISD and every other district. So we just hope as we go forth into 2025 that it's an effective legislative session. Unfortunately, they seem to be so divided up there. They're fighting with each other, and it's just unproductive. I will say this much. There was a lot of good stuff in House Bill 1 that didn't get anywhere. Hopefully those kind of things will impact public ed, not this year coming up, but then the next year. So we can, hope springs eternal. But we're going to have to be busy in Austin. Let's put it that way.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Dr. Kraft, anything else? Then we will, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting. A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Have a great evening.